Welcome, everyone in the United States, Canada, and around the world to another episode of It's a Wrap with Rap, the podcast of overcomers and useful information to better our daily life and mental well-being. I am your host, Ron Rapaport. I would like to thank all of our listeners, our viewers on our YouTube channel, It's a Wrap with Rap, the podcast uncut, and our sponsors and supporters for making the podcast such a success. The podcast may also be accessed through our website, itsawrapwithrap.com, where you can find all the episodes, previews of future episodes, and unique products and services offered from our sponsors, as well as the podcast Book Nook, showcasing many of the books our guests have authored and can be purchased on Amazon. My guest today is John Graham. John has always been a curious person trying a new road, a different direction, another adventure, or maybe failure. As a result, he has gone from homelessness, being a door-to-door salesman, children's home counselor, substitute school teacher, truck driver, fireman, building contractor, minister, journalist, to a business owner and published author. When he met his wife, Kathy, he was living in his truck until it was repossessed. Eventually, John hit his stride at age 53 when he started Good Samaritan Home, a nonprofit agency helping people restart their lives after prison. At age 61, he finished his doctorate, and at age 75, he published his debut novel titled Running as Fast as I Can, which was rejected 200 times, but now has garnered 25 awards, including the prestigious 2024 Story Trade Book Award for Debut Novel of the Year. He is here with us today to discuss his work mentoring low to moderate risk offenders coming out of correctional facilities and share his years of wisdom and experience on overcoming adversity in life. Welcome, John, to the podcast. A pleasure to have you on.
My pleasure to be here, Ron. Thank you. In fact, this is the warmest conversation I've had in about 3 weeks here in Ohio.
I know it's cold. I know it's cold everywhere. We're in January of 2025, and I'm in Florida, and it's cold down here, believe it or not. Now, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, what your growing up years were like, your family life, your school years, and your life after high school, and what are some of the adversities that you faced in that time of your life?
I think the best way to describe it is you have to think back to the 60s. We make caricatures of the 60s, the flower child type of thing and dancing and prancing in our no shirts or no bras and such. But the truth was it was a very, very unstable political time. There was civil rights protests. There was Vietnam War protests. There were campus bombings. There were marches on Washington. There were shootings. It was extraordinarily unstable time. And I grew up in the middle of that. And then you add in all of the Russia nuclear bomb attacks. I literally grew up being trained to dive under my school desk so that I'd be safe from a nuclear attack from Russia. That's the sort of normal paranoia we live with. And so then you go into the 70s and 80s, the factory jobs that provided stability disappeared. And a whole generation lost their stability. And we ended up going into a generation where people were going into ways they could make money fast in the 80s and 90s. And we were left behind because we didn't have nearly the structure. So I spent, I would say, 30 years looking for where I fit in a very unstable world. And that's why when I hear my resume, sometimes I shake my head because we go through 30 years and I think of all the chaos. And I feel great sympathy for people who today are going through job instability or even homelessness, because I know what it's like to say, where am I going to sleep tonight?
Right.
And,
Right.
I give a lot of credit to my wife, and literally everybody told her not to marry me because they thought that I was such an unstable person. I was actually living in the truck when I met her.
Yeah.
But
That's
she saw
what I heard.
something. She saw something, and over time, she was able to, I guess, grow that something that she saw. And it took a long time, but when I was 53, all of those mistakes, I were no longer mistakes; they were learning experiences. And we were able to start a nonprofit called Good Samaritan Home to help other people who were struggling as much as we had. And
Yes, yeah,
that
yeah.
that that changed my life.
We're gonna definitely get into that. But tell me, what was your family life like? When you were younger, growing up.
Ah, yeah. I like to say that there was some definitive situation where a drunken father or an abusive mother, and in truth, we didn't have that. I think it was fairly common. We were ignored. We were left on our own, and our expectations given us were quite low. You go to school, you graduate high school, you get a job in the mill, and you get married, and you just become one of the community. There wasn't any plans for college, any plans for career. We were not told of given any dreams, I suppose you would say. And so, if you're a curious person, that can be very difficult. And one thing I will say about the '60s, it created a great deal of curiosity among some of us. We always wanted to see the next place, and curiosity can be a very creative thing. And so I went to college, but when I graduated, I didn't have any direction. And so that actually makes it even harder because you believe you're educated, but you're not skilled. And so
You
you
think
think
that
you're
was that part of the lack of support you got from?
absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I would say this idea of not having community support and in the '60s, I think we started to come apart at the seams as a society. All of the things that we were protesting as being oppressive, all the parental values coming out of the '50s, the old adage of "don't trust anybody over 30." And we created a very unstable society. And as much as we criticize the rules and regulations to fix these, they created a community, which I believe we've lost in many ways.
Yeah,
In,
yeah,
in fact,
definitely.
there was a book written in the '80s about it called Bowling Alone, which said that we've lost many of our community organizations like Kiwanis and Rotaries and the Elks and the Moose, even the churches. People
Yeah,
are not involved in community events. So
yeah.
you have
I was just thinking about that. The Shriners. I guess they're somewhat active with the hospital. I think it's in Cincinnati. I might be wrong,
Cincinnati. You're right.
but but I was talking with my wife the other day, and I said, you know what? We had the Elks and Masons and all this, volunteer groups. You don't see that much around anymore.
And in many ways, it's with the advent of the internet and now, of course, the cell phone,
Yeah,
we've allowed this isolation to become so intense and so personal. You can have six people at a table in six different worlds at that same table. And I love the fact that I can research on my phone. I can learn anything instantaneously, but it also makes me very alone, and that can be a very lonely existence for some people.
absolutely. You can go on an airplane if there's 400, 300 seats on that airplane. I guarantee you, John, 285 of them are on their telephone.
Oh, it's not even a question. I look around the airport a lot, and I see everybody. And to be fair, we used to be sitting reading the newspaper and reading books, but
Yeah,
now
true.
we're still reading newspapers and books, but they're on our phone. The problem is so much of what we're reading is not newspapers or books; it's Facebook Reels, where
That's true. That's
we're
true.
watching some high school bully pick on a kid, and he's able to defend himself with his superpowers that he learned from Spider-Man, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And TikTok too, that's another one, everything's in 30-second intervals.
Oh
And
my!
and people don't have patience anymore. They just want instant gratification. All they have to do is scroll on their phone.
I was watching a movie last night, Cool Hand Luke.
Oh,
Uh,
right. Yeah, with John. Uh,
Paul Newman.
Paul Newman. Yeah.
Yeah, and my wife and I were watching it, and I said, watch what happens." And she says, "It's slow." I said, "That's exactly right." But it was one of the best movies of the decade, if not of the past 50 years,
Yeah.
because of the character development. But you have to slow down and breathe. And so many of the movies now are just snap, 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 snap,
Yeah.
and there's no breathing involved.
Yeah. I'll never forget that one part of that movie where he eats all those eggs.
Yeah, yeah.
Those those movies were great. So were you in? I had it in my notes that you were in foster care. Is that true?
No, I worked in an orphanage.
Okay, you worked in an
Yeah,
orphanage.
I worked in an orphanage. That was it was in Detroit. Coming out, one thing that we did have in the 60s, Vietnam was a very, very intense thing. We don't talk about it too much anymore, but it was extraordinarily divisive. When soldiers came back from Vietnam, they were not recognized as heroes. They were even booed
Yeah,
for
yeah,
coming. They were called baby killers, and many of the soldiers who came back, they were so divided when they were over there because the politics had taken preeminence over the reality of the situation. We like to look at movies like Band of Brothers and see a very clear bad guy and a very clear good guy. But in Vietnam, it was also gray. And
yeah,
I remember I was in 1970. It was the day of the Kent State shootings. I was at Ohio State, and I heard there was a protest going on in a ROTC rally, Reserve Officer Training Corps. So I went there thinking that I could observe it. And the National Guard came, surrounded the protesters. Word got out that Kent State had just had 4 students killed. And this was a very extremely traumatic time. The guards surrounded us and they had their guns pointed at us, and we had no idea what was going to happen. That was the sort of event that we've forgotten how intense and how dangerous it was, because the only thing that kept that from exploding was that both sides pulled back. But it changed my life forever because I realized just how fragile our democracy was, that we were in the process of civil war.
yeah. Getting back to you, you had many jobs in your life: salesman, children's counselor, teacher, fireman, minister,
Yeah.
journalist. You're searching for the right fit before 2001 when you founded Good Samaritan House or Good Samaritan Home. Which of those jobs did you like the most? And why so many jobs?
Well, part of the problem with having a minimal education, you begin to think you're better than you really are, or you have better skill set. It's like being overeducated and underqualified. But again, without community, without structure, every job you go into is unstable until you stay there long enough. And maybe the ideal one would have been the fireman, because in theory, you're the good guy. You you work what they call a Kelly shift, where you work one day on, one day off, one day on, and so you have a lot of freedom with it, and there's a camaraderie, but there's also it's a semi-military environment, and if I had stayed with that,
Yeah,
I probably would have ended my career there after 30 years with as a captain or maybe even a chief, because I was the first one to have a degree. But I just couldn't fit into the military environment because I guess I thought I was better than that. And again, that's part of that period of time. That was right around Watergate too. So you see all that instability. And so
yeah,
if I had stayed, where would my life be? But then again, if I had stayed there, what would I have not done? Number one, I never would have written the book because there would have been no need to write the book. There'd
true.
been nothing to write about.
Yeah,
I would have changed.
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, it's like when you have an accident and you break your leg. It sounds like a traumatic event, but when that leg heals, it's actually stronger. And so I believe that some of our mistakes and our wrong decisions, they can make us stronger if we can overcome them. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't regret leaving the fire department. I just regret that I created so much instability for my family as I traveled through these various careers.
Which one? Okay, so you like the fireman job the best out of all
Well,
those?
yeah, what I probably liked the best was being a journalist. I stumbled into that because I liked to write, and I was writing a column for the local newspaper. And before I knew it, it was being picked up by a syndicate, and I got a job working for a local newspaper. And I learned so much about government while working for the newspaper. And what I found was that there are a lot of hardworking people in government, not what I thought in the 60s and the 70s, but there are some decent people who just wanted to keep the street lights on. They wanted to keep the water running. They wanted to make the streets safe, just in one corner of the neighborhood to the next. And I learned to appreciate government from seeing it from the ground up.
Yeah.
And I probably would have stayed there if the newspaper industry itself hadn't shifted.
Yeah, it certainly did shift. That's for sure, especially with the advent of computers and all that.
But
Hardly.
out of that came this probably the basis for my novel writing, and the novel writing just totally changed everything because it I had to get into a level of writing that was far beyond anything I had ever done before. So it was clearly the hardest job I ever did.
I want to get into the Good Samaritan Home. What was the catalyst to start the Good Samaritan Home, and how did you get connected to the Department of Correction?
At one point, because I had been in the building business, I had developed a skill set and I was as a contractor, and you reach an age where your contracting is difficult. So I went back to graduate school and I wanted to be a teacher of some sort. So I was told that if I would, I could go into a small church and be a pastor teacher. So I went and did my graduate work in ministry, and I got a job as a rural pastor. But what I found was pastoring as is not as specific as you might think. It's not necessarily the calm teaching experience where you gather around and have these comfortable chats over coffee with all these kind neighbors. A lot of it's politics,
Yeah.
and you're voted in and voted out. And I found that because of my experiences, I was very sensitive to homeless people in our community. So I tried to work to find ways to help them, but that wasn't as politically acceptable to some people in the church. So I ended up losing that job, being voted out of the church as a pastor. So what I did was,
Because you were trying to help people.
yes, in a nutshell. And also the truth was that I probably wasn't that good as a minister, because being a minister is more, I call it, you have to be more of a hand holding, a gentle person. And the truth was that if with I wasn't that gentle, I suppose.
Yeah, people want you to be like one. The It's a Wrap with Rap podcast is so fortunate to have Australian author, artist, illustrator, happiness coach, and international speaker Andrew Matthews as a sponsor and supporter. Andrew's books, including Being Happy, Follow Your Heart, and Bouncing Back, have sold over 8 million copies in 48 languages in 70 countries. Happiness and success are made clear and simple in his writings. Andrew first gained international recognition when world champion golfer Nick Faldo told the world's press that Andrew's book, Being Happy, had helped him win the British Open, and more sporting champions began to read and recommend Andrew's books. Andrew has devoted his life and 12 books to the subject of happiness and has addressed over 1,000 corporations on 5 continents on attitude, enjoying work, and resilience. Andrew is popular with CEOs, surgeons, with teenagers, and even prisoners. His latest book, Bouncing Back: How You Rebound from Disappointment and Disaster, will guide the reader how to crush worry, build better habits, and think like happy people think. Bouncing Back is about rebounding from failure, poverty, illness, loneliness, tragedy, grief, and discovering resilience you didn't know you even had. Andrew pinpoints 7 things that resilient people do that we can do too. Andrew shares 60 inspiring stories of people who were broke, shattered, defeated, and got back up to persevere. The book is lavishly illustrated with 90 of Andrew's much loved cartoons. The book, Bouncing Back: How You Rebound from Disappointment and Disaster, is available from Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook formats. Information on the book will be listed in the podcast notes. Warm and fuzzy, so to speak.
I like to call it a good luck charm, where they say, "Pastor, pray for us." They rub your head, and you make a wish, and so hopefully they'll get that job or get that home run or whatever it is, that get the right winning lottery ticket.
Right.
But I saw myself as more of a change agent because, and maybe that was the journalist in me. I wanted to make a difference in my community, and when I had people come to my door who were just looking for some food or a job or just place a couple dollars to get to the next town. And so eventually, what my wife and I decided to do is, if we can't help them as a church pastor, maybe we can do it on our own. So we bought an old house in town and said, we're going to use this as a homeless shelter. And we started fixing it up and offering our house as a homeless shelter. And it took several years.
Did you live in the house as well?
Yes, and I would not recommend that because this was all we could afford to do. Because what we had to do eventually for our safety was we got another house across the street and fixed it up. So by doing that, we had some separation because
Yeah.
we had scraped together enough we were able to do that. And we had what we call sweat equity. We could do the work ourselves. But what happened was the Department of Correction heard about our shelter and asked us if we would take in somebody coming from prison because he was low risk, but he simply needed a safe place to stay temporarily. And they said they would help us with our funding for that. And the idea is that it's safer if somebody can do rehabilitation in the community after their sentence is completed, because housing is has been shown to be a critical element in rehabilitation.
So
So we started,
it's hard for them to find a place to live.
like, they can't. Here, imagine this: you've been locked up for 5 years or 10 years in
Yeah.
a closet,
Right.
and they release you with gate money, and they say, "Go get a job." But what do you do?
Yeah. Where do you go? Yeah.
And so what we determined to do was maybe we can help somebody get a job or help them find their own place. And we did that one person at a time. And that grew to 2 people, then 4 people. And the need was so great that we're able to start growing more houses because it's actually cheaper to house somebody in the community after their sentence is completed, because it costs $109 a day to house somebody in prison. So if you take $109 times 50,000 men and women, 365 days a year, you see the kind of money we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if they're in community and they're working, they're paying their child support, they're paying taxes,
Right.
they're buying goods in the community, and they're actually becoming taxpayers instead of tax burdens. So it made sense.
Now,
And,
John,
and that's how we grew.
did you house males and females?
Well, we primarily did men because the truth was that the number of women needing houses following prison is statistically quite small. Currently, we do. We have one house that will house women, and we only have 2 women there now. And we're one of the few houses in the entire state because, for whatever reason, women tend to find housing more readily than men. Maybe they're seen as less of a threat,
Yeah.
or they find more friends, perhaps, or they're not afraid to stay with friends. Men tend to be, well, not there are more men in prison, obviously,
Yeah.
but men tend to be needing housing far greater than women.
What do you find that most people coming out of those correctional facilities, what do they want? And let me back up a little bit. I know you have the house, the Good Samaritan Homes. What programs do you offer them?
Well, what we initially we tried to do everything, but that's really impossible. So what we found to do by partnering with the Department of Correction, we took on their idea of what we were asked to do, and that was to offer safe housing for no charge to them. And so we focus in on the housing element. And so what we try to do is teach basic things like, how can I help you get back on your Social Security? How do I apply for food stamps? Or better yet, how can I help you apply for a job? And what we do is we partner with existing agencies like Job and Family Services or mental health. Well, we don't do counseling, obviously, but mental health does. And then the county would have a reentry training program. So we partner with them because they don't offer housing. We offer that for them.
Do you get a stipend from the correctional department for
Yeah, we
housing?
get a per diem.
Okay,
Yeah, and the idea for that is that it's considerably less than the $109
sure.
because even a fraction of that. But as a nonprofit, all we're trying to do is meet our bills,
Yeah.
so we don't charge the residents for that.
Okay. And the people coming out of the correctional facility, after conferring with them, what do you find that they want out of just out of life, out of being out there? What are they looking for?
We used to have a little questionnaire that said, "What can I help you with? What are your goals?"
Yeah.
And virtually everyone would say, "I'm looking for a job and a place of my own." And it just across the board. And the trouble is, if you were to say to somebody, "What are you doing to get a job?" They'll say, "Well, I've been looking online, or I've been asking my friends," but they haven't the foggiest how to apply for a job, and they just don't even know that on an application, how do I fill this out? And we have some people that don't read or write well, if at all,
Yeah.
so they don't know. And that's why some of what the job training that the county does with us is simply how to present yourself for a job interview. Just basic things like, even how to fill out the form, what boxes to check so you don't hurt yourself by saying too little or too much.
Okay. So most of these people are low risk offenders. I mean, you're not getting hardened criminals that are in there for armed robbery or rape or something like that.
Well, initially we were getting low risk offenders, but what happened was that the research was coming back showing that low risk persons need less work, less effort, less programming. It's the ones who are, when we say high risk, we're not necessarily talking about their offense. For example, a man who spent 30 years in prison for murder,
Yeah.
he may not be a risk at all because he's now 56 years old and he's so far removed from that event that he's not all he needs is a safe place to land. Now,
Okay.
somebody who might be higher risk would be the 20-year-old kid who's been in juvenile prison and he's got 3 adult raps coming right after 18, and he has a much higher risk score because his pattern is much greater. And then you factor in drugs. So for us, what I don't look at the offense, I look at his criminogenic pattern. And the truth is, a murder conviction doesn't bother me in the least, but I look for somebody who's seems to be willing to start over.
Okay. Now, at age 61, you complete your doctorate. Tell us about that process and what was that doctorate in again?
It was in applied theology because what I found was that there was it was like Mahatma Gandhi said once that he had great respect for the Jesus in the Bible, but he had a hard time with the Christians practicing that Jesus. So so what I did was I said, what are the real teachings that are in the Bible that apply to what we're doing? And what it came down to was that everything about the church was in the street with the outcast persons, and that's what my research was. It was in what we would call mentoring, but it was in looking at the historic response and the teachings of the church on how to deal with the needs in the street. And it taught me that the primary focus of the church historically has always been with outcast people. And that's why the church went from just an outcast band of people in a hiding in an upper room to today the dominant religion in the entire world. It wasn't because of our numbers or our armies. It was because of our acts of kindness. Now, to be candid, we don't see that much today. So I like to think that our role now as an example of that kindness is even more critical than it was in the past.
What techniques have you found to help people overcome their adversities? Because I know you must be working with a lot of people with a lot of adversity. I've been through a lot of adversities.
Initially I tried to look for some sort of some sort of program or some way I could direct people. I tried to give them an answer of how to overcome their issues and get their life back in order. But after 25 years, I've concluded that what people really want is for somebody to hear them. And I've learned that the less I say and the more I listen, the more they seem to hear me. So I might spend my time saying, tell me about your family, or tell me about where you grew up, or tell me about your kids. And when somebody is able to talk, suddenly it's like the floodgates opened, and they share so much. And what I found again and again is so many of our people have come from dysfunctional homes that they just didn't know which way to go. And so they made so many bad decisions based on their lack of structure.
Yeah.
It doesn't make what they did right or any less of a crime, but what it means is I understand. And so how can we build back? How can we overcome that? And
So they
listening
want
seems
to
to be the way.
they want to be heard.
I'm sorry?
They want to be heard. They want
That's
somebody
right.
to listen to them.
It's funny. I once heard that when I was a door-to-door salesman a long time ago, my sales manager said the most beautiful word anybody can ever hear is their own name. And that lesson still applies because when I get somebody's name and I listen to them and I talk to them and just hear them, that's really all. That's all people want. They just want to know that somebody heard them.
Yeah, very well put. So, so far, how many people has your organization mentored, and has it reduced the recidivism rate at all?
We've grown. The need is so intense, and the emphasis now is on community reentry. In the 80s, there was a lot of emphasis on lock them up, but we found that these long sentences for seemingly minor crimes were not working. So they've shifted back to community reentry like ours, safe housing where you can be involved and invested in the community. And so now we've grown from our one first house to now we have 19 houses in 3 different counties.
Wow.
And in the past 25 years, we've helped almost 2,500 men and women restart their lives. So the question is, have we reduced the recidivism rate? I absolutely, not even a question, but I can't give you hard data on that because we don't track it as such. Because normally you have to track 3 years. If somebody stays out of prison for 3 years, that's considered a lowered recidivism rate. But I do know that in Ohio, we've moved from 50% statewide to 30% statewide. So overall, the program that we're part of is working.
That's good to hear.
Absolutely.
That's good to hear. John, tell us about one or two of your success stories that stand out in all these years you've been doing it.
Probably the one that I can look to first and foremost is Jimmy. Jimmy was schizophrenic. And that's not uncommon with many of the people we deal with, mental health issues. But with Jimmy, he was 67 years old when he came to us. They found him in his car. It had run out of gas, and he was in the middle of winter, and he was nearly frozen to death.
Wow.
And so they brought him to our house temporarily, and he stayed with us for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We got him onto his medication because he was a veteran. So we got him connected with the VA, and he was able to get his medicine to stabilize his schizophrenia. but he stayed with us for 14 years. And what we found was with Jimmy that he came from such a dysfunctional background, plus his mental illness, that he said this was the only stable home he ever had.
Wow.
And eventually he died when he was 81 years old in one of our houses. And I felt like, he was like a beggar at the door in the Bible, where the rich man would walk by him, and then God would condemn the rich man for not helping. But Jimmy, we didn't walk by him; we helped him, and I felt we made a difference in his life. And that's just one example.
That must have been so awesome for you to do that, to see him progress and have a stable life.
Well, it was one of those ones. I keep a picture of Jimmy nearby because I just have to remind myself that he was he was so difficult to deal with that even the mental health office wouldn't let him come in. So that's how unstable he could have been. But when he was with us, he was never a problem because we required that he stay on his medication.
And he probably felt the love you had too, that you were exuding.
Yeah, he and my wife used to get into they'd always go cross purposes, and he would give her a hard time and she'd give him a hard time, and he would smile and say, "I know you love me."
Exactly. What are your thoughts on the support systems, especially for men who tend to hold things inside of them?
That's a good question. There's just a lot of testosterone.
Are you struggling to start difficult conversations at the workplace, at a social gathering, perhaps just out casually in public, or even in the home setting? Leadership coach and attorney Tucker Miller has drawn from decades of experience helping executives, teams, and families the ability to teach how to communicate with clarity and compassion to others. Her book, titled The First Four Words, will reveal to you how just four thoughtfully chosen words can spark transformative dialogues. Tucker mixes research, real world examples, and actionable phrases tailored to any relationship quandary or communication style. Whether you are an introvert facing a networking event, a manager delivering constructive feedback, or a parent smoothing family tension, the first four words will equip you to initiate discussions with ease. Reading the book, you will learn the common excuses we use to shy away from crucial conversations and how to get out of your own way. Discover the four essential talks leaders must have with their teams, dissect the behaviors that build trust, access four-word prompts to reach consensus amidst conflict. Learn how to offer encouragement, navigate gatherings, respond to grief, and much more. Brimming with empathy, wisdom, and a dash of humor, the first four words makes communication accessible. Tucker Miller stresses that brevity and courage are the keys to understanding. The book will empower you to transform the conversations you avoid into opportunities to solve problems, deepen relationships, and create the life you want. Wherever you are at the moment, you can speak up skillfully by starting simple. The book is not just a book, it is a roadmap for those who understand that the key to success lies in the subtle nuances of conversation. For all those eager to elevate their communication game and make a lasting impact both professionally and personally, prepare to be inspired, enlightened, and equipped with the tools to unlock the true potential of your words. The book, The First Four Words, is available in paperback and Kindle format from Amazon.
Running around, and that's why it's much more difficult with the younger guys because they're still trying to prove that they're tougher than the next guy. We like to say he's got another bit in him or another sentence in him. And that's why when I get somebody who's been down the road, they've done some hard time, they don't have to prove anything anymore. It makes it so much easier. Like Jimmy, somebody you could work with. And it's never the offense. It's, are they willing to change? Are they willing to try?
Yeah.
And if they're willing, that's really, so I would say age has a lot to do with it.
Okay. Now, I know you said you had a couple women, so it's maybe this might be a hard question, but what's the differences in mentoring women and the men?
Well, yeah, what women say always, invariably, let's say, I just want to get my kids back. And they mean it, not even a question.
Yeah.
But what they have to do to get their kids back is they have to present some stability to the court. And that means you have to have a job and you have to be clean and you have to have stable housing. And I have found one of the reasons we don't have many women is that they're very quick to grab unstable housing. And that makes their problem even worse because they go back to the same patterns.
Yeah.
So, and not being a psychologist, I can't get into the details of it, but I would say that women's needs are far deeper, far more complex than a man's needs are.
Okay. For people out there listening to this, what should people look for in seeking professional help? What do you think? What should they look?
I've grown to really appreciate the resources we have in the local mental health offices. The downside is it can be so overwhelming that it's very difficult to go through the waiting period. It's like a free clinic. You get exactly what you pay for sometimes.
Yeah.
But this comes back to where having a mentor or having a pastor or having even a friend, somebody you can talk with. Sometimes the best counselor is again coming back to somebody who listens to you.
Okay.
What I did when I was going through college and afterward, when I was going through my unstable times, I used to write in my journal. And the truth was that a journal is probably the best therapy you can ever get because you're getting all this emotion out. So I would recommend to everybody just write yourself a letter if you can't. I'm not saying don't go to a counselor. I'm saying don't wait to go to a counselor. Write your letter, write your journal notes, and still go to your counselor.
Yeah, I've heard so many good things about journaling. You just see it everywhere when you talk about these subjects, how much it's helped people. They really do.
Well, I've been doing it for 40 years. And here's the irony was that my son, who's a police sergeant now, he called me and he said, back when I was growing up, what was it like? What was our family structure like or our finances? And so I pulled out my journal notes and I gave him copies because I had it. I kept all the journals and I gave him, I think, a year or two worth. And he said, I didn't realize how much we struggled at that time. So it gave him perspective and made him realize that what he's going through as an adult is far different than what I went through when I was his age.
We're going to get into the book in a second, but did the journaling help you write your book at all, or are all those journal notes going to be used for another book, perhaps?
Well, the book is not an autobiography, but the fact of writing thoughts, it's not where you say, Dear Diary, today I visited Disneyland, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
But it was just feelings of a
yeah.
young man growing up. And so the idea of getting your feelings out, I think, is critical for a writer. And I have enough Quaker influence that taught me that the necessity of introspection, the idea of looking within and putting those inward thoughts outward on paper is just a good discipline.
Okay.
And it definitely helped start my creative juices.
Now let's discuss your debut book, Running as Fast as I Can. What year did it come out? And tell us about the book and the struggle you had to get it published.
I was 65 when I started writing because I had this idea for a book and I've been germinating with that idea for years. And finally, I reached a point where I said, I'm ready. And so I spent 3 years writing the first draft. And I felt I had a very good story because of my background in journalism and also my training and academic training. I thought I could tell a good story. So I started to market it to agents and publishers, and it got rejected and rejected again and again. And I would come back and rewrite it again. Finally, I hired an editor, and he looked at it and said that you've written what he felt to be a a journalist's story. He gave me facts and figures, but I feel nothing, no emotion in your story. So for 2 years, we worked on that and we tried to bring emotion. We tried to bring feelings into it. And that's where the journal notes came in. All those feelings in the journal notes. How do I put those into my character, Daniel Robinson? And we ended up with what I feel to be a very emotional story of a young boy who grew up in a dysfunctional, broken home. And then he was abused by his pastor. And he spent 10 years wandering the country through the turbulent 1960s. I call it a Forrest Gump story. And he's looking to create a new family through all the what he calls the misfits in the 60s and 70s that he met, from San Francisco all the way down to Detroit with the riots and all the people who were like himself. And eventually he does find this and he tries to create a new family with another misfit named Kate, who was coming from her own broken family. So it's a love story on one level, but it's also a coming of age story. But the whole concept is that Daniel needed a lot of do-overs because he made a lot of mistakes. And that's where I think readers are identifying with it, because one of the catchphrases in the book is that life is written in pencil. We get a lot of second chances.
Yeah, for
And that
sure.
to me is a very optimistic message in an age right now where we don't hear much optimism.
I might add for our audience that it took John 7 years to write it, and he, if I'm not correct, let me know, 200 rejections.
200. Yeah. It got to the point where I expected rejections. But here's the best part, Ron. Once we got it published through Don Quixote Press, which is an outlier publisher who deals in exactly people like me, people who want to just have their voice heard. Once we got it published, we started getting reviews back, and critics were writing back, reviewers were writing back, and it's garnered now. When I originally talked to you, it was 26 awards, but it's actually up to 30 now.
Wow.
So it's been very well received, and it sold thousands, literally thousands of copies. And all the readers have said the same thing. I felt Daniel's story. I went on the journey with Daniel. I traveled with him. So I think that to me was made it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you hope people take away from reading the book?
I think the key, if you're looking for money in publishing, I don't believe it's there. John Grisham may make money, Kristen Hanna may make money, but you can write a Pulitzer-winning novel, but realistically, if you're writing for money, I would suggest you go out and get a day job.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you want to tell a story, just tell the story. Just let your heart out. And maybe if you tell a good story, people will talk about it. And if they talk about it, if your issues are substantive, then I believe you're successful. And the issues we talked about in the book was homelessness, sexual abuse. We talked about dysfunction in the family. We talked about loneliness. We talked about love lost, love found, yeah, the drug addictions. All those issues we're wrestling with today. And if I can get people to talk about those issues, then I believe that my book was well worth the effort.
Well, let's hope they do. Now, for those, John, that are listening to this, they're struggling out there. Can you please speak to them about your thoughts of what they can do to better their situation based on all the adversities you overcame? What can you tell these people?
One thing I've had to do in this publishing effort is to learn Facebook and learn TikTok and learn all the social media. And what I'm finding is that I see my 76 years of gray hair here. You know, I'm an anachronism on Facebook, because all the young bodies out there, they have to be 19, 20 years old, with rippled body. They have to look Hollywood perfect. You come out of high school, you go directly into Harvard, you go directly into this multi-million-dollar corporation, and you're a hero by 25. But life's not that way. So if I can tell anybody anything, I would say that life is not a sprint. you will not succeed coming out of the gate. You will fall down. You will fall down twice or three times, but just get up again because it is a marathon. And my life is a perfect example of that. I've fallen dozens of times. And now at the end of my life, I'm just beginning to see my best years. And I hope that I can squeeze in another 20 years because I have so much that I want to do right now.
Well, I hope you can too. I definitely do. I
Yeah,
and
don't
I
quit
can
trying.
I can relate to what you're talking about. We're similar ages, and we come from, I grew up in the 60s, 70s, just like you. So what you were saying is perfectly true. That's the way it was, and every generation is going to have the same, different things are going to happen, but it's going to be adversities. But the main thing is don't give up. You have to get back on the horse
That's
and
right.
ride. And I always tell people, you got two choices. You can give up and go down a rabbit hole, and it's not going to end well, or you get back up and keep pushing.
I used to say to myself after I had some failure or rejection, I would say, well, I've been thrown out of better bars than this one.
Exactly.
And you just get up and keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't quit trying because once you quit, it's over.
Yeah.
So never quit. Yeah, this comes back to our discussion about Cool Hand Luke. He never quit, even when he was defeated. He kept throwing one more feeble, death-defying punch, even though he knew wouldn't do any good. But nobody could stop him from trying.
Yeah. Exactly. And whoever hasn't seen that movie, Cool Hand Luke, with Paul Newman, I'm sure it's on the internet out there. Get a copy or tune into it and check it out. It's well worth it. John, how can people contact you? They want to get a hold of you. How can they contact you?
Easiest way, and just go to my website, johndavidgraham.com, and that will link to the Amazon page. It'll link to Good Samaritan Home. It'll link to my Substack page, my Facebook pages, but most important, it'll link to a contact. And if you have a question, just send me a quick email through
Okay.
my webpage. I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Okay, great. I want to thank you, John, so much for spending time with us. I want to wish you good luck and good fortune as you continue to help people rebuild their lives and to become the best versions of themselves. It was an honor to have you on here. Wish you the best. And I think what you're doing with Good Samaritan is just great. And I hope you continue to keep doing it and blossom and have many more structures go up.
Well, the good news is we've got 10 staff now, so it'll outlive me. And it's not just my little hobby. It's become a work unto itself. And that to me, my goal is when I die, maybe 1,000 of the people we've helped will come by and say goodbye to me at my funeral.
I'm sure that'll happen. I don't want to even talk about that because I want to see you around here. I want to have you back on the podcast because I think you're going to come back with some new stuff in the next 20 years.
I'm working on a couple sequels right now, so we'll see what happens with that.
Okay, I wish you the best. Comments and suggestions for the podcast, you can email me at itsarapwithrap@gmail.com. You can go on the website, itsarapwithrap.com. All the episodes are on there. We have a Facebook group. We have a couple thousand people in there. It's a private group. So if you want to join, just email me and we'll get you in. We're on Instagram. It's a Rap with Rap podcast. We're on Twitter or X as it's known at Rapper, WRAPPER 130. And of course, all the episodes are on the YouTube channel. It's a Rap with Rap, the podcast uncut. I want to thank everyone for listening or viewing, and please stay safe. And for now, it's a wrap. This podcast is being brought to you in part by the veteran-founded Hero Soap Company located in Phoenix, Arizona. In today's environment, we must be aware of the products we apply to our skin. As a two-time cancer survivor, I cannot afford to take chances, and I use these products myself. The soaps will leave you feeling clean and refreshed. All the products made by the Hero Soap Company are made in the United States with the highest quality ingredients sourced from companies in the United States whenever possible. The products are made in small batches to ensure high quality and contain premium essential oils and fragrance. All Hero soaps are created without synthetic colorants, parabens, and sulfates that are irritating to the eyes, skin, mouth, and lungs, and are cruelty-free, meaning these products are not tested on animals. Each 5-ounce bar of soap is handmade in Phoenix, Arizona, and the body wash is available in 8 ounces with such refreshing scents as lime, bourbon, and frost. You will absolutely love this soap. Please also check out their gear for sale. All the products are reasonably priced. Being veteran founded, the company understands the dedication and sacrifice that each family makes to serve their country. A portion of sales is donated back to charities such as Operation Finally Home, Operation Interdependence, and the Gary Sinise Foundation that are focused on helping veterans and our first responders. Over 1,000 bars have been sent to our deployed troops. Please check out their website, herosoapcompany.com, for pricing and a detailed description of all the products. Now, when ordering, please use the code RAP for a 10% discount. The company information will be listed in the podcast notes.